from the home menu, go to releases. That's this button here. Go to other. Then you go to URI CPIES. And then this is the menu where you send commands. URI commands go from 0 to 76. I am going to send the clear command. You can either scroll through the commands or you can type in the command by pressing the button in the center or the number itself. I'm going to do 76. To send the command, what you do is you press the send button until it changes color and the tone changes, and then you release the button. Now the CPIES responded with 2 pings. And over here you will see your replies. We are doing this in air, so there is a lot of noise. But it will listen continuously for 7.5 seconds. You can increase that amount so it can listen longer. Let's say it can listen for 10 seconds, and you'll see the countdown over here. Let's try it again. Now the PIES already responded with 2 pings at 12 kilohertz. To range to a CPIES, you have to issue the transpond code, and that's spelled E, X, P, and D. So the way you do this is you go to the same menu, releases, okay, we go to URI CPIES, and we enter the code. I'm going to use transpond code 70. Every IS should have a different code. So this is issued the same way as any other command, and the PIES will respond with 2 pings. It was muted, so I just unmuted it. So the PIES responded to the command successfully. Now, I'll show you how to range, but it will not work in air. So the way this works is, now the PIES is in transpond mode. It is no longer in sample mode. So it's waiting for a pulse on 12.5 kilohertz. When the PIES receives a pulse at 12.5 kilohertz, it will ping at 12 kilohertz. So what we do now is we have to set this up here. So we go to settings over here, and we want to transmit on 12.5, and we want to receive on 12. Okay, now the pulse length that we're going to transmit and receive on is 7 milliseconds. Okay, and then threshold here is the sensitivity that you want to listen for, and you need to adjust this according to your depth. So the lower the number, the more sensitive. The higher the number, the less sensitive. Right now it's set to 10, which is the most sensitive setting that there is. So once that's done here, we can go to filter if you want to filter out noise. Okay, I usually like to filter. You don't have to, it'll work the same. If you want to filter everything, right here it shows you what frequencies are receiving and if they're enabled or not. A Y means that they're enabled and the deck box will receive them. So let's filter all. That means none of them are available, and we only want to listen to 12. So let's go to 12 and enable 12. So then once that's done, we can enable filtering. Okay, now we can go back to main. Now in main, we can adjust how long we want to listen to. Now, if this number is too low and the PIES is too deep, you won't hear the response, or the deck unit won't hear the response. So you need to adjust this value to the depth. And so assume that sound travels at 1500 meters per second. So, you know, if the PIES is at 1500 meters, right? Assume that it's going to take 1 second for the signal to reach the PIES and then 1 second for it to return, which means, you know, you're going to need a minimum of 2 seconds. So then you would set that to, you know, 3 or greater is what I would do. So you need to play with this depending on the depth. So I'm going to set it for 6 or 7.5 just because that's the default. Once that's done, what you do is you just hit ping. And we get a response. This is obviously noise because this is in air. So what's happening is the deck unit is sending a 12.5 kilohertz pulse. The PIES is responding with a 12 kilohertz pulse. It records the time in between the transmit of the 12.5 and the receive of the 12. And it calculates a slant range. Obviously, like I said, this is in air, so it's just noise. But we have a slant range of 0.3 meters and a slant range of 75 meters on the second one. Now, you can only do this before releasing, okay? Once in release mode, if you release it, you cannot range to it. So this only works before releasing. Now, if you want to get it out of this mode, what you need to do is go back to releases and send the clear command. Okay. The PIES responded with 2 pulses at 12 kilohertz. And if you notice the time in between the pulses, right? If you look at the time, it's 55 and 75. That's an internal counter. If you look at the difference between the two, it's 2 seconds. This is in milliseconds. So the PIES responds with 2 seconds in between the pulses. Sending a release command is the same as sending any other command. You pick your release code. I'm going to make one up here. Sorry. Let's see, 62. And the deck unit will let you know that that's a release code. That is a dangerous code. You can accidentally release something, so that's why it prompts you and lets you know that it is a release code. And it's sent the same way. This will not release the IES that I have here. Okay. What will happen when you release a CPIES out in the field, if the CPIES accepts the release code, it will start to ping every 4 seconds with a 12 kilohertz pulse. And that's when you know it's in release mode. So every 4 seconds, you'll hear a ping. Once that begins, assume that it can take anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes for the burn wire release to actually burn. Once the burn wire release burns, the IS will begin to float to the surface. And then it rises at about 1 meter per second. So then you can estimate when it will be on the surface by dividing the depth by 60. And you'll get the answer in minutes.